Hello, everyone. This is the Nameless One.
And I am Moon.
And today we're going to be doing game talks again. We're going to be talking about difficulty in games. And before we get started, I would like to remind everybody, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, follow on Twitch, all that good stuff. Other than that, before we get started, we're just going to let everybody know, since this is only our second go around, why we believe we are. I've just completely dropped exactly what I was going to say.
We're going to tell you why we think our opinion matters.
Yeah, that. You go ahead and do it first while I have a momentary brain reset.
Hi, I'm Moon. I've been making small indie games and titles for about 8 going on 9 years now. I've released games on both the Android kind of Play Store, the iOS, and I also have a itch.io page. And I am currently in university to study how to make and develop games professionally.
And I am the Nameless One, of course. Everybody knows me. I have been doing gaming and game streaming for quite a while now. Game streaming is kind of a newer thing. I also spent quite a bit of time not professionally studying, but studying what goes into the making of games. Less so the coding side, more so concept-wise, things like what makes a good tutorial. If you are interested in hearing about that, we already done a episode on that with Procelion, who is also somebody who has been on this podcast before and has done game making. So be sure to check that out after this one. Anyways, to kind of get us started, with how... Jesus, I am just having a time of just speaking tonight. With games, difficulty is one of those hot topics because, there's a few different ways that a lot of developers will express difficulty in games for players, which difficulty is often used as a way to show skill expression in the players, and as well as giving challenges for players to overcome. Now, I'm going to go ahead and point out two of the biggest things that people seem to stick on when it comes to difficulty, which is artificial difficulty and the existence of different difficulties. So we're going to start with that first one. And yes, Cold, we will get to that. But I'm pretty sure that if you've played games for a little while, you've seen the whole... We'll use Doom and Wolfenstein as an example, where they have the baby me to hurt me daddy difficulty names. I'm pretty sure that Moon also is aware of those. Well, sometimes it does come for some people. I have seen a lot of complaints online where they will be like, oh, it's so insulting.
Well, that's also kind of the point of it.
Yeah. So a lot of people will argue with difficulty in games that the highest difficulty is how the game is meant to be played. I've seen that argument pushed out before, where people will be like, oh, it has a insert difficulty level here. For example, with Baldur's Gate 3, I believe it has it's called Honored Mode? Honor Mode? Correct me if I'm wrong here.
I believe it is called Honor Mode, where you only get one life, you get one chance, and if you mess up, you messed up.
Yeah, so that with Honor Mode, a lot of people would argue that's how the game's supposed to be played. Meanwhile, you have on the flip side, where a lot of people argue that the existence of the difficulty slider, as we'll call it with the different levels, the difficulty slider allows for accessibility for people that aren't as skilled. Because let's be honest. Gamers that spend a lot of time gaming have a tendency to be incredibly masochistic. Prime example, there is a guy who is a streamer who went from the first game, Demon Souls, all the way to Elden Ring without taking a single hit in any of their From Software games. Without, like, and he basically marathoned it and streamed it all, and it's just one of those, like, who hurt you? Do you need help? Now, before we continue, I'm going to point out that people like that tend to be more of an outlier than a rule. Not everybody's going to be that ambitious, but it does kind of illustrate that, like, a lot of hardcore gamers tend to be very, very masochistic when it comes to the difficulty in games. However, one thing that a lot of them seem to forget, and I'm sure Moon will be able to corroborate this for me, but if you play games casually, so like say you've got a 9 to 5, you're going to work, you get maybe 2 hours to play, you don't want to spend that entire 2 hours looking at the same death screen. You want to enjoy the game, have fun, feel like you're doing something, and then just be able to put it down and come back to it later. Which is often... Go ahead.
I could spend so much time talking about just games where I've spent more time dead trying to make progress that I've just given up on the game itself than I would probably like to admit.
Yeah. My experience with that is, like, there seems to be, like, two types of players that you'll see. There's the ones that they will spend so much time dead and staring at that screen going, the game sucks, it's too hard, it's what's the word I'm looking for?
It's unfair?
It's unfair, there we go. And then you'll have the people on the other side who have beaten it at the highest difficulty, just yell, get good, scrub. And to some extent, some games it does require that. But to kind of tie into the previous podcast, it also depends on the amount of tutorial that they have to go through and the caliber of tutorial that also attributes to whether or not getting good is even possible for casual gamers. One of the things that I've noticed with when it comes to difficulty in games as well is that the existence of a difficulty slider also brings a certain level of shame when you tell somebody, oh, I played it on easy. Because there's just kind of a stigma in the gaming community. It's worn as a badge of honor and accomplishment. There's also the issue of artificial difficulty. So I'm going to let Moon kind of explain this a little more, because I feel like he might have some more appropriate examples, and then if he doesn't hit one that I think I can think of, then I'll come in after, but Moon.
So, artificial difficulty, the easiest way to describe it for people who aren't familiar with the idea, is that when you sit there and you make things difficult without the difficulty actually adding any value to the game at that point. Usually it's when you're facing the same monsters or the same enemies or the same puzzles, and nothing's really changed except for some numbers behind the screen that makes you die faster, run out of time faster, or give you less moves, or in some way restricts you without making things more mechanically interesting. Phantasy Star Universe, the original MMO, had a big problem with this when you got into higher levels. Most MMOs have a problem with this when they release a hard mode for a raid where nothing actually changes except for how difficult the enemies are. You can see it in a lot of the Monster Hunter games with the high rank hunts where usually the monster doesn't actually fight any differently or do anything differently. It just has more health and deals more damage. Or first-person shooters are incredibly large offenders in this, where the way the game becomes more difficult is that the enemy is suddenly more accurate, they do more damage, and you have less health.
I think another good example, I was actually playing this recently, a few months ago. Zombie Army Dead War 4. Title's a bit of a mouthful, but their highest difficulty. Apparently, they just ran out of ideas and resorted to just yoinking your HUD. So
that sounds horrendous.
Oh yeah, it's miserable. Like, as somebody who has a tendency to be more masochistic and prefer to puzzle my way through problems in games rather than just throwing my hands up and giving up, I wouldn't even want to touch that one. It was misery. I don't go to that kind of game to count bullets to make sure I don't run out of ammo. Or hope desperately that the thing that's on cooldown that I should be able to tell if it's powered up or not is powered up or not. So
yeah, that sounds terrible.
Yeah. Artificial difficulty is something that a lot of gamers hate. And you will hear it on games all the time. Things like Destiny, for example, with some of its wipe mechanics, where it's just like, oh, you took too long, now die. Oh, you died in this thing, now go back to orbit. Oh, you want this to be hard? This enemy has 80 billion health. And it's kind of one of those situations where Cold says, reminds him of GoldenEye's artificial difficulty. Once you have 007 on everything, you can toggle sliders, 100% more accuracy, damage, etc. Called License to Kill mode. Yeah, that does sound about like what we're talking about. Now,
also seems really terrible.
Jesus. You fit an entire sentence in one syllable somehow. What did you say? Wait. I can see you're like hitting the button. Oh. And we're back. How about now?
There we go.
There we go. I mean, yes, it's self-imposed cold, but at the same time, so is the ability to turn on the no HUD mode in Zombie Army, and it's not fun. I can see you like hot making occasionally. Are you good over there?
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure we didn't lose you again. But that kind of leads into what I had to say next. The main thing with a difficulty scaler, or even having no difficulty at all, is that overall, the game still needs to be fun. Challenging, yes. You can have a game be challenging, but also still be fun. And I think Moon can agree with me on this one. Not every game needs a difficulty slider.
Some games are hard enough that a difficulty slider kind of just feels insulting.
In the words of the Cloakers from Payday 2 and 3, This is what we call a difficulty check. But seriously, though.
Sometimes I hear them in my nightmares.
Oh, God. But yeah, sometimes, though, when it comes to games, and yes, obligatory Dark Souls reference here. The games aren't made to be easier. They're made as what. So this is going to sound really weird for those who don't understand what I'm about to say. But the Dark Souls games are puzzle games. They're also somewhat rhythm games. If you look at, say, Bloodborne, the combat happens in tandem with the music that is happening as well, which is why so many people, like, they can memorize the patterns and everything and get to a point where they can play the entire game without even so much as taking a single hit from the bosses. And why sometimes some of the bosses can even be less difficult than some of the regular enemies, because the regular enemies don't follow the same pattern. But the way that difficulty generally is supposed to work, in a way that is generally more fulfilling to players, is that you give them a problem. This problem may be giant dragon dude is in the way of my loot. But they need to figure out how to fix that problem. And a lot of games that want to make it more difficult just go, well, we just give him a health bar that he can measure the space between continents. But with, for example, the Dark Souls games and, well, really any From Software games, which is why they're so good, is the difficulty spike does not come from, oh my god, it has a gigantic health bar. It comes from the fact that everything you do is on you. So you need to decide, like, what puzzle pieces of the tool set that you have can best fit this puzzle to stop an enemy. A good example for something like this that's a little more like mechanical, a lot of Destiny's boss fights. I will always harp on this game, but for one of the things that I think it did well the first couple of times it tried it, not the 6 subsequent 37, one of the things that they like to do is, like, they have bosses where you have to do specific things to make it so that you can beat them down. Sometimes it's go stand in this spot and collect this thing to move to this other spot and stuff like that. But that kind of puzzle work, a lot of people won't view it as a puzzle game because it's called a first-person shooter. But the puzzle, it will still be there. Bludgeoning a box of numbers to death is not fun. I'm sure Moon can also attest.
Can confirm. Would rather bludgeon a can of numbers instead.
Yeah, because then you gotta figure out how to open the can.
Exactly.
But yeah, when it comes to the difficulty spikes like that, like, it's a lot easier and a lot better. Well, let me rephrase that. It's a lot easier for the developer to just slap big numbers on it, whereas it's a lot better to spend the time to come up with mechanics that the players have to work around. Because numbers don't make a game difficult. They make a game tedious. Mechanics are what makes a game difficult. Would you agree?
Yes.
A good example that Moon actually already brought up, Monster Hunter. So, like, one of the core concepts with Monster Hunter is you smack things with big sword and watch number get bigger. And I kind of agree with Moon on the Monster Hunter high rank. Everything starts hitting harder, and everything starts taking more damage. Effectively, if you are doing what the game intends for you to do and grinding up all of the monster bits into armor and weapons, you really didn't change much. the numbers that pop out when you smack the monster just got bigger. And a lot of games fall into this trap. Hell, even like actually pretty much every MMO I can think of off the top of my head has fallen very heavily into the number go bigger trap. Number go bigger is fun. It gives like that dopamine rush as like you hit something for, oh, I hit it for like 8 million damage. But when it takes the same amount of work it did from level 1 to level 100 to kill the same thing, it makes it kind of meaningless. Which actually brings me to a really good topic: dynamic difficulty. So I know some of you may have played some MMOs. If you haven't, then I would recommend trying some out. But everybody will recognize that level 1 area where you're cowering from a slime, and then you move on to fighting gods, and you go back to the level 1 area, and the slimes disintegrate in your vicinity. What dynamic difficulty does is now the slimes are just as hard as the deity on the other end of the field. And that kind of difficulty, the scaling difficulty or dynamic difficulty, I can't remember which one would be the actual appropriate term. I'm pretty sure it's scaling.
It's scaling, because dynamic tries to make everything feel challenging, but does that through changing and tweaking things actively, while scaling is just numbers get bigger and smaller based on you.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, scaling difficulty, my bad. Scaling difficulty is basically like, you can be level 500 in the MMO game that you're playing, and you go to the area that you started out in, and everything there is just as hard as the level 500 area you just came from. It shows the player that all of the progress they've made really didn't mean anything. They didn't go anywhere. They basically stayed in the same place the entire time. Now, player may not initially recognize that. Depends on how blatant the scaling is, and whether or not they're told about it initially. Because I've noticed, you tell a player their scaling difficulty, they will notice it quicker, and they will bitch about it. If gamers are good at one thing, it's finding out the things they don't like and bitching about it endlessly. But one moment, I grab a new bottle of water. There we go. But it's not like, I think I might understand the concept, like why they would want to do it, but it's not a good way to introduce difficulty. So since I horrendously fucked up on the explanation of dynamic difficulty, thinking it was scaling, I'm gonna let Moon explain dynamic, because I know there is a massive difference.
Dynamic difficulty is when the game adapts to the choices of the player in a way that isn't necessarily designed to make things hard per se, but to kind of change and give you a variety of different challenges to kind of keep you moving and on your feet. So it could be, well, you're doing very well with these enemies, we're going to send in a few more, along with sending out some variations. It could be you're progressing really fast down the story beat, so we're going to sit there and interrupt it with this little side tangent that will sit there and reward you when you get to the end of it. It could be the game notices you're using very specific types of magic, so it sits there and starts sending enemies that are better equipped to deal with it. Not really as just a fuck you, but because the enemy is kind of trying to feign intelligence by better coping with what you do. So essentially, the game is hard because it's adapting to you rather than just making everything harder in reference to you.
And I feel like that's also a good way to build more immersion, honestly, because it's adapting to the way you behave rather than... I think, wouldn't Dishonored be a decent example of that? You go...
Dishonored is a great example because the way the guards are set up is that they adapt to how you've been playing the game up to that point so far in how they patrol, how they act, how quickly they respond, what type of responses that they'll jump to before others is based off of how loud you've been, how stealthy you've been, how many people you've killed, how many bodies have been found, what you've kind of been doing to deal with your like assassination targets.
And it's not just the guards. The world itself will also change. I know that if you were particularly murderous, you will find that there will be a lot more rats and the weird zombie things that they've got going on. I forget what they call them off the top of my head, but I believe they also start upping security in places that you need to go. What were you going to say, Moon?
I honestly forgot the zombie things even existed.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people try to be quiet and clean about it instead of going on murder rampages like me. I basically tried to play Assassin's Creed, but like you could murder anybody you felt like it. But yeah, the dynamic difficulty not only will build a lot of immersion in the world of the game, but it will also prevent people from getting frustrated because they feel like they've made no real progression. I do know that another example of like the smacking boxes and numbers, the Division. I think it was. I can't remember if it was the first one or the second one that people had the most.
All of them have problems.
All of them?
Yeah, because the Division, a lot of people try to defend it by saying it's an RPG instead of a first-person shooter, but when you add certain mechanics, you add certain expectations of those mechanics. So you have a Tom Clancy game, which is a series that historically has been tactical, high-stakes shooters, where you are now suddenly mag dumping a light machine gun into a random dude with a baseball bat because they're like 3 levels higher than you.
And that doesn't even kill them. It's just like a tenth of their health. I remember one of those fights. That was the fight that made me quit that game. When the dude came walking out and we had like 5 people empty entire magazines of light machine guns. And then, like, he wasn't even half health.
Although, I don't think that was really difficulty in and of itself. I think it was a lack of tone awareness on the game's part.
Well, my kind of, like, reasoning behind that was the fact that it's often, like, considered a form of difficulty.
That's fair.
It would be kind of the same as like going into high rank hunts with the first weapon that you unlock for Monster Hunter in any category. You're gonna sit there and never finish a hunt because you're doing chip damage to something that went from like reasonable to deal with to has absolutely gargantuan health pool.
Don't call out my hunting horns like that.
I'm sure they get better when you get new ones. Maybe. It's actually really good that we're kind of talking about Monster Hunter with it being so fresh for everybody too, because it has some pretty decent examples for some of this.
Yeah. I almost wish we had Monster Hunter come out after the tutorial one.
Oh god.
Or before we did the tutorial podcast.
Honestly, we're gonna talk about that. I know this is the difficulty one, but we're gonna talk about that. So the tutorial should not be the first half of the game. I'm sorry, I have to say it. And the tutorial should also not include on-rails sections where the most the player can do is set their controller down and walk away because they might as well not be playing the game. That is not a tutorial. That is a cutscene. You can have cutscenes, but it doesn't. Don't give the player the expectation they should be part of it.
I've been very productive ever since I started playing Monster Hunter. I mean, thankfully, the on-the-rail tutorials are long enough that I can do laundry, I cleaned up my kitchen, my sink is empty of dishes, and that's just work that I do while the tutorial is going on.
So, I think the biggest thing that I have an issue with the way the tutorial worked is they also let you do things that they would then take away from you in high rank. So a bit of a spoiler warning for anybody that hasn't played and actually, cares about the story. But eventually you will fight something that is basically just a giant octopus. Got some really cool armor. They eventually make you, let you make it and wear it. And then you get to high rank. And then you see the thing spawn. And you go to smack it. And then all you hear from the handler is, "You're not authorized to hunt that." I'm like, but I already did. I just want the better version. What do you mean I can't do it? That right there is, in my opinion, bad game design. Because you gave the player the expectation that they can have this, and then you took it away and told them, "Not yet, you're not big enough." But also didn't give a indication of, well, when can I have it? And the game just kind of goes, I don't know. So yeah, I may have a bit of a bone to pick with that one. But yeah,
that just sounds really dumb.
The length of the tutorial and the fact that the first half of the game, pretty much all of low rank, might as well be a tutorial. The very last thing you do in low rank is go fight a critter, and they force you to capture it because they didn't tell you how to capture things before that. And then you basically left to your own devices to go hunt whatever you feel like. You can still kill it if you manage to do enough damage to it, but things like the apex predators, you're not supposed to. You don't get the things like the you can't make it into a quest. And technically speaking, in the lore of the game, you get considered a poacher and they send assassins after you, apparently. If you do unauthorized hunts. I would take a lot of this opinion back if they had the balls to actually do that. And I don't think that they do. Because
I'll be whacking some mudbloods.
Because I've definitely hunted things that I was not specifically authorized to, and nobody said anything about it. Every time I go on a hunt and there's 4 monster corpses instead of 1, I'm pretty sure that I'm more of a threat to the environment than anybody else. But getting back to the actual difficulty discussion, I do want to kind of talk about the whole accessibility argument for difficulty sliders. Because normally, anytime From Software releases a game, is when you get to hear about, people want to be able to play this game too. They want to be included, but it's too difficult for them, and it's not accessible, and yada yada yada. It's almost always aimed at From Software, almost exclusively, honestly. And to this day, they have not changed their mind on their vision for their game. So it has always been difficult, and will stay that way. I don't know if they've launched Night Rain yet or not. I don't know if that one's actually out or not yet, because I I haven't heard anything about it.
I haven't really heard anything either.
But here's like stepping away as a player for a moment and kind of approaching it more as an artist. There are some types of arts out there, whether it be a sculpture, a book, an actual picture, even music, that it's either hard to look at, hard to watch, hard to understand, hard to listen to. And video games are also a form of art. And sometimes that art will be hard to play. Sometimes it'll also be hard to look at. Just look at, I think it was Scorn? That was the H.R. Geiger inspired one?
You mean the game that was more art piece than game?
Yeah. And it was very clunky mechanic-wise. It was very, like, disturbing to look at. And, like, the game mechanics were actually very sparse. But it was meant more as an art piece and more to say something than it was to actually, be a functioning, like, fun game. Even the clunkiness of the mechanics and the uncomfortable nature of the mechanics was meant to be a part of the art. Now, for From Software, part of their art pieces, every game they've ever released so far, even the ones that nobody really knows about from the early PlayStation eras, like, all of them, not only is each subsequent game they release a culmination of everything they learned from the previous game, on top of that, it is meant to be difficult because they want to say something with it in a way that having a difficulty slider, you can't do that. So, as somebody who has played very few of the Souls-like games, I am very well versed with Elden Ring, and that's about it. I know a little bit about Bloodborne, but there is something that is, even if you're using, say, the seamless co-op mod, there is something to be said for the satisfaction you get from beating the likes of Malenia. Even if there's some cheese involved, because apparently she can't get past shields. Which is actually kind of amusing to watch, to the most difficult boss, arguably the most difficult boss in the game, reduced to beating the flat side of a big piece of rock to try and kill someone. But the satisfaction that comes from making it over the hill that is the difficulty curve for the boss fights in a Souls-like game is much more satisfying, because the way that FromSoft makes their games is they don't make boxes of numbers that you just beat to death with the biggest stick you can find. Well, yes, there is some of that involved, because, you can, if you try hard enough, you can reduce most games to beating numbers with sticks. But the way that they do it is in the mechanics and skill necessary. They teach you what you need to know, and sometimes in very subtle ways, and then let you figure it out from there. So when you get to your first actual boss, it is your own skill that gets you through it, not the fact that you had number with bigger number. And because of that, they not only become some of the most satisfying games to complete, they keep numbers that would make certain live service games blush. There are still hundreds, if not thousands, of people playing even the oldest of the Souls games. Now, I can't say as much for their early PlayStation entries, because those are a lot harder, A, to find, and B, to run, because of the age of the game. But, like, from Demon's Souls onward, there are people, you can find people all over the world still playing those games because they made a game that was fun but challenging, not just hard and tedious like some games that have tried to copy them. Would you agree, Moon, or am I just talking out my ass at this point?
No, I'd agree. A lot of people neglect to remember that when a game is made, it's made with a certain type of experience in mind, and well, there are things that can be bent and shifted, and even to some extent broken in order to make these games more accessible to a wider audience, so that way more people can kind of like experience it. There's only so much you can do before a game isn't the game in anything other than like aesthetic. So you have Souls games, for example, where it's like, oh, just make it easier. Except you take a game that is about what, essentially just defeating gods by sheer spite and insurmountable will, and you kind of just turn it into a Souls-themed RPG.
And don't get me wrong, even like Elden Ring has RPG elements to it, so RPG elements isn't going to make a game bad or anything like that. It's just how they're utilized. It's what the actual impact of those elements are. If you're telling the player that this silencer will add 0.2% damage to their gun, that's what is that? How are they supposed to visualize that? How does that make sense? Whereas with something like, say, Dark Souls, when you upgrade a weapon, you feel a difference in that weapon. So a lot of those kinds of mechanics and systems need to have impact in order to actually contribute, as well as like not just being number go bigger for number go bigger reasons. And sometimes those RPG elements don't have to make number go bigger. They just have to do something different. You know, the difference between carrying a weapon that deals some sort of like poison damage compared to a weapon that deals some sort of fire damage. RPG elements, I just want to make sure that we understand that we're not saying RPG elements bad.
Is that you just make the game a generic version of its genre once you strip away certain aspects of it.
Yes. But yeah, it's definitely one of those things that you can kind of see both sides of a lot of these arguments, but there are certain games that the only real response is to get good. I do have some issue with certain games, though. I can't remember. There's an example of a game out there. I'd like to say it's Ninja Gaiden, where their lowest difficulty, you don't even get to actually finish the game. It basically gets you to a certain point and tells you to quit being a bitch and turn up the difficulty. And I feel like if you're going to include a difficulty slider, it'd be better to just leave it like that and let them finish the game, or just not have it at all. We don't need to turn it into an actual, like, you can't play the game. Do you have any comments on that, Moon?
Besides the fact that's kind of really funny.
It is kind of funny. It's one of those like situations where it's like I, as somebody who's never had to deal with that, I can laugh at it. But at the same time, I could see like how frustrating that would be, that because even with the easiest difficulty, apparently it is still quite challenging. I still can't remember exactly which game it was, but like you get to the end and then they basically tell you got to go do it all over again in order to actually finish the game.
I mean, I complained about that in some games before, and I believe I get told get good scrub by the community.
And there's the other thing we should probably talk about is the get good mentality. So sometimes the difficulty in games can also not actually be a difficulty spike or a difficulty slider. It could just be obtuse. It could be that some mechanics are not as easily grasped as others. And then the real
Almost every game with parrying.
Yeah. And then the real difficulty spike shows up when the person who's going like, I want to complete this game, but I don't know what to do here, goes to look for some help and gets the get good scrub. That I'm going to say that mentality in and of itself causes a lot of issues with why people demand difficulty sliders. Because the community, rather than trying to walk them through like what they could do to possibly help it, and sometimes I will give some of them credit. Sometimes the people looking for easy ways through aren't exactly great either, but helping someone to learn to play the game rather than just telling them to get good. Just because you suffered through it the first time doesn't mean you can't share your wisdom and that the other person on the other side has to suffer too. Helping it, I believe the term is rising tides float all boats, I believe. But then again, the communities that I am looking at when I say this kind of stuff probably don't give two shits. So, but yeah, I do believe that sometimes that can artificially lend to difficulty that was never intended by the creators of the game. Because, they thought they did the best job to explain what needed to be explained, but then, some people just don't get it. So when they turn to the community for help, and then the community just tells them to get good, it can cause problems. Not necessarily true difficulty, but it is something that adds to difficulty occasionally. I do like the idea, though, kind of going back to the high difficulty, low difficulty, not inserting things, rather than keeping from the easy difficulty, like the ending of the game. There are some games out there where if you complete it at the highest difficulty, you get special rewards. I believe Resident Evil does that, where if you beat it on the highest difficulty, you get a gun that basically turns the game into a shooting gallery.
Oh, Resident Evil 4, you get the Mega Man Blaster. Which is not a Mega Man Blaster, but it's a Mega Man Blaster.
I believe there's the finger gun from Dead Space as well. I'm pretty sure you have to do it beat it on the highest difficulty, and then you literally get like one of them foam hands that you run around yelling "pew" and everything dies.
That's amazing. I might have to replay Dead Space now.
But yeah, I think that I know it exists, but I'm not entirely sure if that is 100% the way you get it. But I do know games do things like that. Total actually brought up that Baldur's Gate 3 gives you cool cosmetic dyes that basically, I'm going to assume, tells everybody that, hey, he beat Honored mode. So that basically means that, like, without withholding the ending of the game, now they have bragging rights. Be like, hey, look what I did. Look at my accomplishment. Because at the end of the day, most of the time, if a game has a difficulty slider or is just difficult, when you complete it, that's what it is you get bragging rights. I beat X game on the highest difficulty. Like, the guy that went through and did every Souls game at every single game that they have ever, FromSoft released from Demon Souls on, because I don't know if he did any of the ones before that, but did all of those without getting hit a single time, that guy's not going to get paid or anything. He's doing it for the bragging rights, for more than anything else. He can say that he did it. He probably will never do it again, based off of my my research on how he reacted to finishing it finally. But he can say that he did, based off of the way he reacted to. He had long time, like partway through that, decided this was the worst idea, which I do not blame him. But yeah, it's probably also where the get good mentality comes from. Is like, it's that sense of achievement. Now, for those of you that follow my Twitch, you may know that I've been a little obsessed with this game. It's a bit of a it's a free to play game. You may have heard of it, Marvel Rivals. So there's a difficulty in that isn't quite. It doesn't have a slider. It doesn't. Nobody really thinks about it until like you're getting into very high levels of play, and that's difficulty built into like how a character is meant to be played, and then on top of that, how you can end up playing them regardless of intention. A really good example of that is Spider-Man. Oh my god. I have watched good Spider-Man, bad Spider-Man, have played Spider-Man, and 99% of the time, things are happening on screen, but God knows what they are. But this kind of leads into what something I mentioned earlier called skill expression. Skill expression is somebody can take something that is considered difficult or easy or whatever it is and make it work in scenarios that, in some cases, really just, why is it working here? Who knows? Nobody knows. But it's called skill expression. And the ability to use those kits, to use those abilities, to use the ultimates, all of it, to make things work is something that for those of you who have never played a hero shooter, that is a lot of the draw for hero shooters. Is taking the kit of the hero that you choose to play the most and making it work in whatever situation that you're in. Or if it's not able to work because somebody's skill expression is working out better than yours, then switching to one that you can outskill them. That in and of itself is also a form of difficulty in games. And I want to gas up Marvel Rivals a bit here in saying that they did a very good job in putting together kits that allow for a lot of skill expression. Their entire game is built more on skill, in my opinion, and I am not an expert, but in my opinion, they built a game more for skill expression than Overwatch ever will be at this point. Moon, would you like to weigh in on anything on that?
There's a lot of technical kit. Some of it can be bugs that are just going to end up being fixed. Some might be bugs that might stick around. Unintentional difficulty, or I guess a better thing to call it, would be a unintentionally high skill ceiling through like emerging mechanics. Is definitely something that Marvel Rivals has, where you basically need to learn animation canceling and how to masterfully pull off combos. However, because it's a high skill game, there is also a large subsection of the community with a get good scrub mentality regarding things that are actually broken and need to be fixed.
Now, I would like to take this moment to kind of point a finger at my boy, For those of you who have been watching me play Marvel Rivals, you'll know that I play Jeff the Shark quite often. And I feel like this kind of illustrates what Moon's saying a bit, because when the game first started and nobody knew what was going on, he was brokenly overpowered because nobody knew that you could dodge out of it with Star-Lord, that you could go into turret mode or use your ultimate as Punisher, all to just like escape. Not even mentioning all the multitude of other ways. But the skill level needed to play and to survive these games ultimately will begin to shift the more the game is played, which is something that is fascinating to watch. Is one of the reasons why I fell in love with Rivals so quickly, is because rather than seeing a rather stagnant meta, you get, which I don't know if I need to explain that term. It stands for most efficient tactic available. There may be some variations, but that's essentially what it is. But the meta was evolving at a real pace rather than just stagnating like Overwatch. That's actually a good example. Right now, Wolverine is very hard to counterplay as a tank, especially at lower levels of play. And the main thing that separates low and high level players is their ability to use the tools afforded to them by their character in efficient and skillful ways. And honestly, this will go for a lot of these types of multiplayer games. TF2, for example, is another way that you could use skill expression in the kits afforded to you. I will say that a lot of online games that don't have this kind of thing where everybody's on the same playing field, it is literally just a skill issue if you're not doing great. Either it's their skill is higher or your skill is not low or is too low. That is not difficulty, that is just a pure skill on skill battle there. But characters with unique kits and things like that will allow for different types of difficulty. It's just why, if you notice, if you play Marvel Rivals, for those of you that are watching that do play it, they have a star system that tells you how difficult a character is meant to be. I will say that I do believe there are some that their star difficulty should be changed because the community has learned to play them. And some of them, they were given more difficulty than they actually have. But for the most part, they are not wrong when they say like things like Spider-Man has a 5-star rating. Jeff has a 1-star rating. I think he has a 1-star. But like,
yep,
it tells you at a glance, this character is going to be hard as hell. But this one, not so much. You can do it.
No, man, don't you know? Jeff is brain dead.
That's where skill and expression comes into play, and it depends on how you play him. As a Jeff main, the best way to play Jeff in a skillful manner is what I call Jungle Jeff, where you're in their backline, harassing their healers, taking the point while they're all busy trying to get in a team fight, and getting flamed by everybody on your team because you're not doing as much healing as the Cloak and Dagger. Never mind that we got everybody on the point because Jeff went and sat there and started capping the point, and the entire enemy team turned around and tried to chase him. But you know, skish you. But yeah,
You're a little bit less salty now?
maybe just a little. But that being said, is there anything in particular that you would like to bring up, Moon? Because otherwise, I think this may be just one of the shorter episodes. Because this is a pretty cut and dry topic.
There's nothing that I can really think of to use as a specific example right now. We've covered quite a few things.
Okay. Then I think this will be a good point to go ahead and end it for tonight. For those of you that are watching, I may or may not be live tonight. I haven't decided, but I will definitely be live tomorrow morning for Lost Memories, barring any random acts of God. Oh, shush. Quit accusing me of things, Cold.
Oh, good. You got accused instead of me.
What would they be accusing you of?
I don't know. My life is weird.
Your life is weird. We all know this. And your weird has apparently leaked into my life too, because now I'm going to a rave. But for those of you that enjoy this, I believe next week it will be the Alicorn Discusses, followed by the fanfic reading that I do, and then the week after will be the writing podcast. Other than that, Sunday will be the usual Heart of Darkness, followed by a probably rival stream, if I'm being entirely honest. If you can't tell, I may just be turning into a rival streamer. But other than that, we hope to see you guys soon. We enjoyed doing this, so if you want to support the channel, check out the Patreon. There's YouTube memberships. Twitch is definitely a good way to support me. Big thank you to my priest tier Patreon, Cameo Shadowness. But other than that, I hope everybody has a wonderful evening, and don't forget to drink water. Do you want to say something too?
Hydrate or dehydrate.
There we go.
Life dehydrated is a difficulty spike.
How weirdly topical.